And hello, everyone. My name is Anastasia Grace from anastasiagrace.com, and I am a energy practitioner, emotional clearer, hypnotherapist, and deconditioning mentor. And I have decided to make this series of videos having open communication conversations with men in my life and that I interact with the purpose to show how much beauty and how much knowledge, how much value there is when you actually open up that I don't know, you can call a Pandora box, but in reality it's just like a magic box. Every single man I have ever interacted with carries so much wisdom and so much knowledge and so much beauty inside of it that we sometimes women do not see. So this is one of those conversations with one of those incredibly men, Rudran Brannok. Rudran has a huge history in masculine and feminine studies. He's a coach, he's a facilitator, he's an elder, he's a mentor. 16 years ago he's created a festival joining all about masculine and feminine coming together. The festival is still happening. He's also a consulting editor for the magazine Living Now, and he consults in matters of masculine and feminine. He is also a head of department of masculine and feminine studies of Sustainability Research Institute. So he knows a lot about interaction between feminine and masculine energy. And today I would like to ask you tons of questions, Rudran, if you don't mind.
I absolutely do not mind.
Beautiful. Would you like to share a little bit more about yourself and what is it that you do? And I know that you write in your book as well. So if you could just introduce yourself a little bit more.
Well, there's so many threads in a life.
Yes.
I think probably a defining part of me was I died when I was 3 years old in an ambulance. And they brought me back with a shot of adrenaline into the heart. Okay. And they told me I was never the same after that, okay, which I can understand that. But I lived a life of incredible solitude, and I still do. I spend most of my time on my own. I'm very social, like I'm not antisocial. I'm both an introvert and an extrovert. Mm-hmm. But I simply spend a lot of time on my own, and when I was very young, a lot of that I was very lonely, as a child and as an adolescent. But I eventually learned the beauty of aloneness, and out of that came a really deep reflection of what I am, who I am. When I was 12, I remember thinking, because I got very good at mathematics and academic things, and I could work out anything mathematical. And so in my 12-year-old mathematical mind, I thought, I can work out anything that's going on, and and there were lots of difficulties in my family. So my mind turned to what's actually going on. It turned to psychology and social psychology and philosophy and all of that at a very young age.
Wow.
So
that is a young age.
It is a young age. What I did not know was I was okay when I'm with family, when I'm reading a lot, I'm okay. When I used to get with people, I used to have such terrible trouble, and that eventually I became quite a alcoholic and took a lot of drugs. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I was 39 I went into a 30-day retreat of rebirthing and yoga and all kinds of things like that. Mm-hmm. And I was having an issue with some woman, and a facilitator said to me something like, "Is that your emotion or her emotion?" I said, "Well, it's my emotion, of course." She said, "There's no of course about it." And suddenly this thing opened up, and I discovered that I had this really deep empathy, which meant for just about all of my life, I thought that everybody's emotions were my own. I found it
Yes.
incredible.
Yes.
And I felt I could relate with people if I was full of booze or whatever. And what happened was when I was 27, I could not stand it anymore to society. I'd been suicidal and all kinds of things. And I went away and lived on the beach. And I found this discipline for myself of spinning a stick. And this was before the feral people adopted fire twirling as their spiritual discipline, you know. And so this was just a small baton, like baton twirling. And it had a bit of a martial element as well, like with the Sinawallis of Arnis and so on. But I spent nearly 3 years traveling the beaches, living in a tent. And when I did that, within 2 weeks of going to the beach, I wouldn't take any more. I didn't even smoke cigarettes, no booze, nothing. I didn't even drink coffee. I rarely drank even tea. I drank just water and some juice sometimes. Then when I went into the culture, I went into society. Within weeks, I'd be boozing, and it drove me crazy. And so I just had to avoid it. And what I had discovered back then was my chi. I discovered prana just from spinning the stick. And I discovered how to be in my center, how to be in hara. And then eventually this gave me the ability and the power to start coming back into the society. And I didn't, I used to think, if only I could do with my whole body what I can do with a stick. And then when I was 34, I began to, I found an Aikido class where I could go. I'd done a few classes, but I found this place where I could study 6 days a week. And so I did that. And I went and saw this doctor. I said, what do you know about alcoholism? He said, I know a lot, actually. I said, well, I want to stop drinking and take up Aikido. And he said, I will help you. And he did. And I went and, dried out. And I went to a halfway house and blah, blah, blah. And then he put me on sickness benefits for 1 year so I could stay out of the society and live in my tent and study Aikido, which I did.
Wow.
And then eventually, when I eventually got my black belt, I went to the martial arts shop and bought a cheap one. And I made an appointment with him and I took it to him. I presented it to him as a gift. I said, thank you, sensei. I gave him this. And now he has it hanging on his wall. Anyone who comes in with drug problems says, you see that black belt there? So that was my beginning. And in the discovering of ki and chi, I'd learned Aikido as I learned about the yin and yang of a movement and ki. I always say ki because it's a Japanese way of saying it. And that's how I was trained. So it's easier for me. And then eventually I had 7 years of very intense training and I got my black belt and my wife and I started off Aikido Association in Lismore and so forth. And then I discovered rebirthing this retreat I went to, this 30-day retreat.
Yeah.
So eventually lived at this place for 2 years. I immersed myself in rebirthing and group facilitating and all of these things and yoga and all of that. And I had been doing, even on the beach while I was an alcoholic, I was doing some yoga and stuff like that as well because I just got it from a book. I used to do Tai Chi movements from a book, I'd be going,
yes.
When I went to my first Tai Chi teacher, he laughed. He thought that was so amusing. So I went in all of that and then while I was there, we did a vision quest. And the result of that vision quest for me was to discover the natural place of the feminine.
Wow.
And so that was about 20-something years ago. And since then, I've stayed true to my vision quest and I went deeply into that. I remember coming from a meeting. I was often at this rebirthing community. I was often the only man. The meeting was about half a dozen women and we used to do inner work together. And this thing went on. It was all about men and women and they were shitty at me for spending so much time alone in solitude. Some of them were. And so we had this big process that went on and I just stayed in my truth in that. And these women had all these processes all around it and all that.
As usually women do, we always have process. We have to, oh yeah, we always.
Women do. And what was good for me was I held my ground in there. And most of those women, probably 4 out of those 6 were really hot on my trail, right? Wanting me to be different. And I stayed clear in what I was. And it finished about 1 or 2 in the morning. It was a big thing. Right? And I walked from the hall, I walked across to my caravan where I was living. And I walked through the car park, and this amazing thing happened to me. Like somewhere up above me, this stream of light came down through past my eyes. And this woman's face came down and showed itself very briefly and then disappeared. And another one came, and another one came. And all these women's, and all these archetypal faces of women, like the mother and the crone and the Jezebel and the temptress, and all these like archetypal faces of women that flooded through my consciousness. And then it just stopped, and everything was, and there I was in a car park,
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, women have a right to their own power. And
Wow.
this was a deep, deep, deep revelation. Because being in a man's body, I thought about power mostly as being, about
Yes.
being martial and being, and my job was to have that power to protect the women, the children of the land, and all of that.
Yes.
And all these things which I'd known subconsciously, like the power of yin, right? This pure power of yin, this pure power of the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And so this whole thing of the divine feminine revealed itself to me.
So can you tell me a little bit more about like when you realized about women have right to their own power? So how did you understand in that moment what is the feminine power is?
Well, in that moment, I didn't understand as much as I do now.
Right.
So I won't speak of that moment, I'll speak of now. Well, for me, the feminine is the subtle. Okay. And and it seems to me that I inherited a masculine body, and it's a lot easier for me to embody masculine traits. And a woman with a feminine body, a lot easier for her to embody feminine traits. And so for me to just live a life of softness and nurturing and all of that, I have got all these other things that go, get hard so you can protect them and all of that. I've got these other things that are easier for me to embody. And one of my difficulties in growing up was my mother was really manipulative with her feminine power. And it was like that a lot. Like, we have very young culture. And so as a young man, I thought the crying of women was a way to control me. So I had to grow out. I had to realize that this whole thing of emotion and women and all that is a thing that I had to learn. So I had to learn that because it wasn't modeled to me in my growing up by my family.
And can you give me an example of manipulation by the feminine?
When my parents split up, like we went with my mother, and she would get into some emotion.
Mm-hmm.
She would drag us kids in to support her view of what was going on while she was in this state, like so to use her emotion as a power to condition us against our father and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
She used to do that kind of thing quite a bit, but that was a major one for me. And part of my closing off was I refused to push aside my love of my father because of her view. Even as a child, I would not do that. Yes. And so I sort of pushed away this crying thing as a child. I had it paired with manipulation.
Yes.
And I've seen it many, like my view now is very different. Now I understand that when we are younger and we come into a certain power, we just try it out, we just try, you see, there's a young woman, she comes from childhood into womanhood, she starts getting tits, and the men looking at her, and she'll do a couple of things. She'll either strut around, go, oh, this is pretty good, because I'm getting all this attention, and then she'll realize that she can direct her power here. She can say, invite some men in, push some men out, this and that, and she can set men against each other, and she can do all of these wonderful, powerful things with the power of her sexuality. And I find that really beautiful. Like I find it's really wonderful to see in adolescent girl women, you know, like I love seeing that developmental thing, and I love to see them coming into their woman. But I find it it's a bit tired to see it in a 50-year-old woman, or and she hasn't grown
Yes,
up.
yes, I understand what you mean. And I guess it's also beautiful to see when it's kind of guided or supervised rather than it's hurting someone or used for manipulation to with someone who's not prepared or cannot see it. So with any power comes responsibility, isn't that?
Comes responsibility, that's right.
Yeah, and what I find that we've lost living outside the tribe now is say in tribal environment, when you come to your growth, to your puberty, to your power, you have grandmothers, you have elders who will teach you how to use this power correctly without hurting or emasculating or manipulating. And the same
Yes.
will happen with a boy who is raised. He will be introduced to the man's way, to the masculine way, and he will be introduced to the feminine, and also guided and supported by his tribe in this growing stage, which is now we are cut off. And from what you're sharing in your example is that you had to face your mother trying out her powers, but you were too little to actually understand or see it without being affected or traumatized or hurt or closed off. So what happened is you had to shut yourself off.
That's correct. That's exactly how it happened, yes. And now, of course, I just see that she was just young and undeveloped, you know.
Yes.
She's simply, and I have a lot of room for that. I got a room, you know, I mean, I've got plenty of room for that, but she's 86 now, so she's a bit old to go through her adolescent, you know, initiation.
So I have a couple of questions for you here. So what does it mean for you to be a man?
Well, there are many contexts for this, okay? Because being a man at 20 was different than 30 and at 40 and at 50 and now at 64. Part of being a man is to grow into eldership. So I'm actively and choicefully involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I have understood in my growth into being a man is that at each stage of development, I need to incorporate more of the feminine part of myself in order to expand me enough to allow the next level of masculine development. And when that next level of masculine development comes, I need to grow into that and be able to hold an internal space for myself to embody the next part of the feminine development. And so as a man now, as a mature man, a part of what defines my maturity as a man is the level of embodiment of the feminine that I hold. And
for those men who do not understand or do not know what it means to integrate the feminine, how would you explain it in a kind of simple ways?
Okay. Well, I was trained not to have much emotion as I grew.
Yes.
And I grew up mostly in a mining town, which is a hard place, you know, mining town children, you know. And so I had to learn how to express emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn. And I did learn in the rebirthing, but the fastest thing for me was learn how to do it with the men. Okay, was to have other men who had already embodied that and to model that and to feel safe to be able to do that without thinking I was going to get manipulated because I was having emotion, you know. And so, you know, I went and did a lot of men's work. And so one example is this feminine way of being able to emote, I had to embody that. And once I had done that, it opened me up to a feel of feeling and of sensing the world that was hidden to me before. So this was part of my maturation as a man. So I embodied this feminine part of me in order to, and now like I can hold that space before, when a woman would get emotional, I would close off when I was a young man. And now a woman gets emotional, I hold that space for her. You know, I just look, and she says all this wild stuff, and she's, you know, says all these amazing words, you know, and for me, they don't actually mean anything. You know, it's just a lot of verbal, like the white caps on top of the waves. And I just sort of stay in who I am. I just sink down to the deep currents of the ocean of her and find out what is there. And I respond to that. So this is a part of the depth of the man that I am, because I've embodied my own feminine capabilities.
Beautiful. That's amazing. I think it's one of the biggest one, most important one for in relationship, and relating to men is being held in that and being seen and understood. And so many men just as you said, shut down or shut off, or just get lost and confused. And actually a new generation that I see is getting into pleaser mode of how can I fix it, how can I please you, how can I just give you anything you want, because they cannot handle that turmoil that feminine all of a sudden she goes into this.
Part of it is that they're believing what they read on social media, right? I always tell you, do not believe the content of what women are saying. Don't just believe it because they're saying it. This is nonsense. You need to go underneath that. And to get underneath, you have to go deeper internally to yourself and relate. And let your mirror neurons fire about what is underneath, not just what you imagine she's saying, just because she's saying a bunch of words. That brings me also to the maturation of us as a people. And there's a great call from the women for men to grow up. And what is not understood very well is that the level of that call by women is still quite juvenile. Like the level of that call is not very mature in itself. Because when a woman is just expressing emotions in it, she doesn't even know what is going on, particularly for herself, and she can, often the man can help her find that. But with maturity, a woman does learn how to do that. She does learn, and the maturity of a woman is when she also embodies the masculine in her. All of the really juicy, powerful women have a deeply embodied sense of the masculine, which is that dot inside that teardrop of yin of her feminine, you know, and that is powerful. You know, I mean, what's that woman's name who does those workshops? You know, she does the one about the Queen.
Alison Armstrong. No,
Alison Armstrong.
Is it Alison Armstrong? Yeah,
Alison Armstrong. Yes, and she says that, you know, the essential man is tough on the outside and soft on the inside. And the essential woman is soft on the outside and tough on the inside.
That's what it is.
It's kind of a bit like that. And I really love being with the mature women who if they get become emotional, their words are congruent with their emotion. This is the mark of a mature woman. Whatever a woman is still spitting the dummy and saying any words that might be hurtful, she doesn't care. She's only getting lost inside the emotion. She's still quite juvenile. She's still quite adolescent. And that the men need to hold the space for that. Yes, this is wonderful. But the women need to hold that space for the men too, so the men can do that. And I don't mean all the time. Like, I mean, there's sometimes, you know, like that.
Yeah.
And this is how we grow each other. And when there is love, when there's this intimacy in love, then there is this spiritual principle that when we are in the aura of someone who is conscious of their process, then our process in that area quickens. So if my woman is she knows how to swim, she drops in. If I'm intimate with her in that moment, and I'm right inside of her, I'm not talking about physically, sexually in that way, but aurically,
connected
in her whole field. And she just does this incredible dropping into surrender, which never ceases to amaze me, this capacity of woman. when I get it. I find in her, when she does that, I get it. It comes into me. And I experience what she experiences vicariously, and I get a learning of how that is done. And I can do that now, not as easily as, many of the women I know, but I can do that. I can simply just drop and surrender. And I got this from being intimate with a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the women. When she can be intimate with the man, and this capacity of a man to be like a rock in the storm of emotion, and she intimate with him, when she drops into that surrender, where she just drops it all and opens to him, and she can feel that. And she, in his aura, she can learn how to do it like that.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have to go to all of the training, all the men's work he did to get there. She gets it immediately through this shamanic transmission that happens in the moment of love and intimacy.
Wow. So we as masculine and feminine have so much to teach each other and like to help each other grow and expand. It's incredible.
That's it. And it grows like that. It goes. I'm writing this book called The Masculine and Feminine of Just About Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Bit of an amusing title, but
sounds very interesting.
It's about that whole process, about how the masculine and the feminine, they move each other all the time. We grow to a feminine level, and then out of that feminine is born a whole masculine sense of structure and form. And this new level of the masculine holds a space for the feminine to operate at this newer level. And out of this newer level of the feminine, which then becomes the ground of being, out of this new ground of being is reborn the masculine, which holds a space. And so we do this. And it's all throughout evolution. And when we were evolving, we had this really fixed ways of, our genetics were such that our instincts were fairly set. And so we behaved in instinct and desire and all that. So this being set, this form and structure is very masculine. And then the next form of development was the limbic system, about we have emotions. So all these animals have emotions, they're next up. And this is very feminine, this capacity to have emotion and emote to that, which is much more fluid and much more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And out of this was born the thinking, right? The thinking part of us. The thinking is very masculine. And this can hold that space of emotion. It can hold. And the next level from this is intuition, which is feminine. So we go instinct, emotion, thinking, intuition. And in evolution, it goes like this. No? This is how it goes. And at the subatomic level, everything to, And so what we can learn from each other as men and women, and learn from each other is still a kind of a separate thing. Like it's like, I learn from you and you learn from me. Like it's a linear way.
Yeah.
We absorb each other, where causality is a reciprocal thing that happens at the same time. This mutual, and this is difficult to understand, but this is a feminine way to see things. Women see this mutuality of life much more easily than men.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a long time. And when I started to see things and speak a more feminine language, and I started to see, I'll give you an example. I was making love with my partner some years ago. I'm not with her anymore, but she was very highly trained in the more mature sexual arts. And by mature sexual arts, I'm talking about what are normally called tantric or normally called kadoshka or sacred sex. It's got all these wonderful names. It's really simply mature form of sexuality.
Yep.
She was more mature than I was in there. And so we were, I was riding her wave. And I was holding this space, and I was on her wave, which I love. And so, we're going to this place, and suddenly, I just took off on my own. I just went. I was no longer holding the space with her, and I could vaguely feel she was still connected with me. I had no idea how that could be, but anyway, afterwards, and it's all over, I said, how come? I said, I just meant somehow I was still connected with you. I got no idea what happened in there. And she was just very matter of fact. She said, oh, when you took off, I said, I just rode your wave.
Well, that's a whole new conversation. We're like about conscious sexuality is a hugely different, absolutely massive conversation. But in what I wanted to ask you so now you are using a lot of feminine language, and I can hear it as well. How would you express it to men who would like to expand more and understand themselves better and come out from that closed state? How would you talk to them, and how would you kind of open up the doors for them speaking their language, speaking the masculine?
Well, it's this level that you're talking about is pretty well the adolescent level of life, and most of our society is in that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, current president of the United States is very adolescent. Our current leaders are also in our Australian society, Australian politics, they're very adolescent as well, like the church leaders, all industry. These people, I mean, they value the captains of industry, like they value them to be, you know, like competitive and virile and all of this. These are the qualities of male adolescence, you know.
Yes, which is completely shut off from your center and from your essence or your feelings or emotions, and it's fully driven by this part, by cognitive, by analytical part of you.
So generally what I do is I speak to that as if it's adolescent when I'm with them, because that's exactly what it is. You know? You know, you get a CEO from a really big company, and when he's away from all that power structure and he's just hanging around with people, those guys have got people skills. But when it comes to anything of depth in community, they're totally lost. And so their sense of identity and self and power is contextual with the external environment. Whereas where I bring the men is how to have your power internally. So always I start with the body. Yeah? I start with the body. Where are you in the body? And I teach them about being in the center of their body, in a hara, and how to use their ki, how to use their energy, not to be so much thinking and what you're conditioned with culture, but to be in the essence of the energy of yourself as a man.
Mm-hmm.
We explore out of there, like we come out of there, and it's a lot easier for the younger men than the older men because they're more open in there. The older men, you know, think you're talking horse shit most of the time. But you know, but this is simply the way that I approach it. You know, some of those guys that think this is nonsense, they might go with some of the other older men who have different ways in, and they can find their way. You know, so we're just talking about how I approach it.
Yeah.
So I just approach it from the body, from ki, and from adolescence. And I just help them grow those parts up. You know, it's really quite simple.
Yeah, I think we always find our way. It's just no matter where or how long your path is of self research, development, discovery. Eventually, we're all going to be there. Eventually, you will come to self. Yeah, eventually, it's sooner or later you will come to self. So I have a question for you. What is great about being a man?
Well, I don't know how much of this is great about being a mature human being. Like some of this is probably for a woman and man, but I mean, I don't want to divide off my life into what's masculine and not, but I love my capacity to respond to the world. I love my immediate, in the moment, ability to respond to what's going on. And I do it straight away, you know, I do it, something happens and I just focus, go whap, you know, and I'm in it, and, you know, and if it's not dangerous, I can back off a bit or you know, those sorts of things. So I love that. I
Oh,
absolutely
that
love it.
sounds amazing. I wouldn't mind borrowing some of that. Because
Oh,
as a
it's so
feminine,
good.
I go like, oh.
And what this is this capacity to, what Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, he said, know the masculine, be in the feminine. And
Mhm.
this is true of everything. You know, like so I live in a life of feeling. Okay. I live inside that. That's where I live. And then something happens, I need to snap into a particular focus. It might be of thinking, it might be of something. And I come in this really masculine way, and I deal with it in a very pointed and clear fashion.
Mhm.
And when it's over with, I drop back into this more kind of calm and relaxed place, this more feminine. And this is because I'm a mature man. And I also know this is true of the mature women as well.
Yes,
So,
maturity is actually a bliss, I have to say. When you said it's great to be a mature human being, I can totally relate because and before we were talking about mature feminine, mature woman, I have realized that up until the age 35, I could hardly I hardly knew myself. I
yeah,
hardly ever um, actually felt or understood myself. And something happens, and I've noticed and I've seen it in so many women again and again and again, that something happens after the age of 35. There's just like boom, it's the mature feminine kicks in and she takes over, and
yeah.
then it just becomes this beautiful, absolutely beautiful journey. um this question about, oh, this is I would like to hear your answer for this one. What is your definition of an honorable man?
Honorable. I don't usually use those kinds of terms much anymore.
Yes, why
Um,
not?
because they compare to what is dishonorable.
Mm-hmm.
And, and this thing of the language of opposites, this is the language of the masculine. And the language of the feminine is the language of complementaries. And so generally, when we talk about honorable, you see, if we say a man keeps his word, that might be said to be honorable. Okay. But if you have a look at boy psychology, for example, and you say to the boy, and the boy says, "Okay, I'll meet you there. Well, I'll be there at 6 o'clock, right? 6 o'clock, I'm not there, not there." You see, oh, I forgot all about it because something that there was this. I was in this game with this guy, and right? And so he is not dishonorable. He's just a boy. See what I mean?
Yes.
Whereas a mature man says, "I will be there," and if he knows he's going to get into something where he gets lost, he sets an alarm. So he stops doing that and goes so that he can keep his word. And so this is the more feminine language when you see these relationships that are of, they're reciprocally, intimately together. They're not one or the other, like honorable or dishonorable or all of that. So anyway, so I'll talk about it in that way. For me, I keep my word. Okay. And I'm also capable of not keeping my word
Mm-hmm.
if I decide that something has taken precedence over that, and I make a mature thing about that. And I will do my best to let the person know, or I will apologize after or whatever. And I'll be genuine that I could not keep my word. But I don't need to hold on to my word like an absolute thing and feel guilty if I don't do it. I don't do that. So, and not only that, I'm expanded enough to be in relationship to the land and to be in relationship with the culture. And sometimes if I go down to cut limbs off the trees, I go into the tree, I touch that tree, and I go into it with my aura. I say, I'm cutting this limb. So please forgive me. Be with the mother, you know. And I open in there and feel, I know what I'm going to do. And clearly, and I get this right, cut, simple, no guilt, no regret, no nothing. Okay? So I'm in there fully.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing too about being honorable, Locke, I don't, and again, I don't really call it this, but I'm trying to answer your question in a serious way. I never make false apology. You know?
It feels like honor is more like an internal state and integrity.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And the word integrity comes from the word integer, which means the one.
Mm-hmm. So
it comes from the wholeness of a person. You know, that's why you would never say, "I'm sorry if I hurt you." You know, this is a hypothetical apology is a nonsense. Okay, mm-hmm. It's a way, something that people do so they can avoid having to go deeply in and having to feel that they've actually wronged somebody.
Mm.
Because when you've actually wronged somebody, you feel remorse. Mm-hmm. And that's straight away is to make amends. That's remorse. You know? But guilt is a social thing. Like guilt is something about. So I don't feel guilt. I don't do that anymore. You know, I feel remorse when I've wronged somebody, but I never feel guilt because I should feel something. You know what I mean? And that is a matter of integrity and honor also. You know, I would never dishonor you by giving you a hypothetical apology. I would never do that.
Mm. And what qualities do you respect, or not just qualities, but what do you respect about other men?
What do I respect?
Yeah, when you see something in another man and you go, wow, I really respect that. What would that be?
Well, it has been different things over the years. When I was first learning, when I started going to men's gatherings and doing men's work and so forth, I realized that there were men who had qualities that I admired. And I had this thought, I thought, if I go and hang out with him, I will learn that. So I remember this German guy named George, and he just had this amazing masculine presence. I just loved this guy. And so I said that to him. I said, "You got this great presence I love. Can I come in and hang out with you?" And I must have sounded like an adolescent, and that is an adolescent attitude. But I was very honest in myself in that. Yeah. But he had it and I didn't, right? And I went and helped him build a chook shed. Okay. And I actually I was inside him. I talk about this intimacy of man and woman, but this thing of going into the other, to go into the tree, to go into the other person, this capacity is a very important thing to being human. This is deep empathic thing. And you go into that person and you can feel what is in them, you know? And so I could feel as he moved with his great strong body, and I had to hold the beam up while I, drilled the hole or whatever it was. And I could feel that inner core strength in him. And I began to feel that in me and to move my body. And I thought, yes, and to be decisive. You get this nail, okay, and you go tap, tap, tap in case you hit your thumb. And of course, what happens is you end up hitting your thumb, right? Yeah. But if you get it and you line it up and you go, poof, drive it straight into the wood, okay? This clear focus of body and mind. And he had that. And so I did hit my thumb a bit, but not as much as I used to. And not only that, I would go like this and something wouldn't feel right, so I wouldn't hit.
That's clever. Yeah,
and
because sometimes ego would go like, oh no, I would still hit, but actually listening to it is like, oh, okay, hang on.
Ego makes more swollen thumbs than anything else. So I do those kinds of things. I just go and hang out. If I see something that I admire in a man, I go and hang out with that. And I'm happy to say that more often nowadays, as I approach my eldership, I have younger men coming to hang out with me. So I think, I get that.
Yeah. That's actually
their turn now.
That's very beautiful advice of yeah, if you want to uh, develop those qualities in you, or invoke, like awaken that qualities in you,
Mm.
just go and hang out and model. And in NLP, that they have the whole kind of method of just modeling a person.
That's right.
But here is also just a transmission, just being, allowing yourself, opening your field so that quality can come in and being activated inside of you. That's beautiful. I'm going to use that. Thank you.
Well, that feminine quality of wonder,
Mm.
quality, this is how this expansion is feminine, contraction is masculine. And so this expansion of wonder, like knowing and coming out of knowledge, is a contracted thing, because that's of the past, and you contract the present through the past, and you focus, and it's a very good ability for many, many things. But it is really crappy for growing up. Okay.
Mm.
You know, for growing up, you need to open out and wonder. And so if you have the humility to go and hang out with a man who has a quality you admire, and you put up with his egoistic bits and all that, and try not to respond off it, and just be, and then you will grow up very fast. The fastest way, for anybody to grow, is to be in wonder, which is the feminine, and develop a discriminative mind, to be able to discriminate what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If all you have to do is wonder, then you're just like a child. Okay, you're childish, not childlike. You're child. You wonder. Oh, I wonder about this. Oh, yeah, isn't this wonderful? And 30 seconds later, oh, look at this. Isn't this wonderful? 30 seconds later, oh, look at that over there. Isn't that one? But you need to be able to discriminate. I'm here for this. And you got this wonder, and you stay there. So the capacity to focus holds the space for wonder, and in this way, you go. Growing happens very fast in all of that.
Beautiful. I'll just have a couple of more questions. I wish I could speak to you, like, obviously I can speak to you for days and days and probably months, and it will never, that the flow of knowledge will not stop. How have your needs changed since your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and now you in your 60s?
The veil that separates me gets very, very thin these days.
Separates you from what?
That separates me from the moment, that separates me from you, that separates me from the land, and this veil is made out of both the animal and the cultural. It's made out of desire, which is of the animal, and it's made out of thought, which is of culture. And it creates this big veil where we live inside what should be, and we live inside the past, what was, and we live inside concepts, and we look through the veil of yesterday, and look through. And now that I'm been paying attention for a long time, and I'm in my 60s, this veil gets very thin. And I'm often in this place where I am simply awake. And that happens to me a lot. And then when I've lost it again, so I'm not in it now, but the veil is quite thin right now. Yeah? And I try to force it by meditating. I'm going to be awake. I'm going to be I just stopped doing that recently. That was a bit silly. but that is probably the biggest thing. And my desire to understand, well, I had a very big desire to understand when I was young. And I don't have that anymore, because understanding comes naturally after, when I'm in it. When I'm so totally in a moment, I'm just in it. And later on, when I look back, understandings come to me later. I don't have to be in it and try to understand, which was a big trap that I was in.
Is it like, while you are trying to understand, you're not being in that, because you're separated from being, because you are actually here trying to understand.
Yes, exactly. I'm separated from being by thinking.
Yeah, guilty of that.
Thinking and doing always arise out of being and feeling. Okay, the masculine of thinking and doing arises out of the feminine of being and feeling. when we're unconscious of the being and feeling, then we can live inside this thinking and doing for bloody ever and not grow and not get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when the consciousness of feeling and being that thinking and doing takes its correct place in the order of things for me. And that's the big thing that's different for me. My relationship with women is very different as well. Okay. When I was first, say when I was 20 or something, I just had no idea whatsoever. The whole female thing, that was so mysterious. And I had no idea how to behave. Okay.
Mm.
And now, like 45 years later, 50 years later, now I've got no idea whatsoever. Okay. The whole female thing is very mysterious to me. But now I don't try to understand it. I'm just totally okay with it being like that. And I can respond with it in the moment without any problem. I don't need to understand. I don't need to work. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to do anything with it.
Mm.
So, very big difference.
Wow. Well, and my last question would be actually, what as men do you need from us women? So what would be so great that we can do or behave, or when we raise our sons, when we in relating to other men, to our fathers, to our boyfriends, to our husbands, as a woman, what can I do? How can I behave that it's for the best, for the benefit, for the expansion, for the beauty, for the connection, for the opening of the masculine and of this harmony of masculine and feminine, rather than emasculation, blame, upset, resentment, and so on that gets built up of these emotions. And I guess my biggest pain comes from when I see in people this build up when they can't go past it anymore, when the separation happens. So it's so huge that there is no way back. So like hypothetically, as a request from a very, very wise man, what would it be to receive from a woman in different age, different stages of your life? How can we contribute as women to better harmony and kindness and love on this planet?
In 30 seconds or less?
Well, 5 minutes.
Well, I would like to see women pay more attention to growing themselves up and less attention to growing the men up.
Mm.
There is nothing that grows the man up more than being with a mature woman. When a woman starts to see the boy parts in a man, normally when they get together and they're young, they've got these girl parts and boy parts, right? And if a man doesn't do his inner work, then she will get, if she has a child, immediately she will start to grow up. Biologically, she will grow up because she's caring of this person that comes out of it. All this amazing developmental stuff happens. And in a society where we no longer have initiation of men, the corresponding ability for men to grow at that time becomes less. So she starts to notice the boy parts of him, and she knows she needs more because this family thing grows in her much faster than grows in him. But the tendency is to mother the boy. Okay? She's coming into motherhood, she's learning this way, so she starts to mother the boy.
Yep.
And she thinks this is more mature, but it's not. When you put a teddy bear in a pram and you push it around and pretend it's a child, this is not mothering. This is a little girl playing mother. Okay? And it's the same. When you mother somebody or something that is not a child, this is not mothering. It's girl playing mother. And when a woman tries to mother a man, She's in her girl, she's not in her woman.
Mm-hmm.
If she wants to go into her woman, she must look at this man and say, this is my man. He has some boy parts that I want to see growing up. And so she treats him as a man who has some boy parts that need growing up. Okay? This is the woman's attitude. Only the girl mothers what doesn't need to be mothered. Okay? So this is one thing. Another thing I would like to see is, you know how women are constantly complaining that they'll be in something and the men will straight away, they want to fix it. Okay? They want to fix it because we're good at that. We fix stuff, you know. We see something that feels a bit wrong, so okay, how can I fix this? And it's a beautiful impulse from a man. It's a really beautiful thing. And there's a lot going on in social media. It actually shames that and makes it wrong and you know, and so on, which is very foolish. So we are actually equal in many ways, like equally adolescent with one another, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem like the way to women, I know. But the feminine part of this thing, the feminine equivalent of fixing it, is making it feel better. Okay. This is the feminine equivalent of men wanting to fix it. Mm-hmm. So something will be going on with the man, and she will try to make it feel better. Mm-hmm. Now, this kind of relates to mothering in a way too, but it is really annoying. Okay.
Making it feel better. Okay.
If you've got a man who's in his boy,
yes,
and a woman trying to mother him, then the boy and him will go, oh yeah, suck it up, you know, and just like get really sucky and oh yeah, like I'm getting what I want because I'm just in a boy. Right? But when he's in his man and he's distressed or something, and she's in there trying to make it feel better, it is so irritating, you know. Okay. It is so irritating. I don't want it to feel better. I want to study what it is. I want to study its nature. I want to penetrate to the heart of the thing so that I can grow up as a man. I don't want this blanket put over me, this blanket of feeling and emotion by this woman who I love and who I, you know, and she's got such power to do that, that it blankets me, it covers me. I've got to shake it off, you know, and I go, fuck it. I'm going out to the shed. I go out to the shed and tinker with a few tools and process on my own, you know. Mm-hmm. So what I would like to see for, you know, just step back. Watch your girl impulse to make it feel better. Okay. I don't need you to make it feel better. What I need for you is to come into me and see what it's like in here. I want you to use the depth of empathy that you have as a woman rather than the emotional tricks you have as a girl to be in empathy with me.
Wow. Okay.
That's what I want. Okay. So that's a couple of things. And this whole business of moralizing, right? To moralize, to try to change me into something else. Instead of spending so much time trying to change me into what you think I should be, I would like you to pay attention to feel who I am. I want you to feel who I am as I am. And for my work with men, a very great deal. And one of the things we do all the time is we spend a lot of time just seeing each other. And it's a very big thing. You know, we'll be in a circle, we have a talking stick, and a man can talk with no interruption, and he can give his whole heart, and the other men focus and they train on only paying attention. And this is something we don't get when we grew up because our fathers weren't there. We were raised mostly by women. Our school teachers were women. You know, we come in and there's this thing growing up amongst the women that, you know, we have to make it all feel better. We have to change men into something else. We have to do this. We have to do that because that's the way they grew up because they didn't have fathers either, right? And they grew up in a way where the women did all that stuff, so they think it's their job. And it's not. It's not. It's not. If you can come into me and see me for who I am, I get acknowledged, that boy part of me gets acknowledged, possibly for the first time ever. And and I can open out of that place. And in that openness, the woman invites to a bigger place. And the feminine is invitation. The masculine is to initiate. In that place of openness, that the boy inside that man will initiate something. And this is where he rises. It comes rising out of his adolescence into his manhood. And this is how a woman can help this. And it's developmental, women, I've heard women say so many times about how men's egos are so fragile, and they often laugh at how fragile men's egos are. And over the years, we've wondered, well, if the women laugh at how fragile our ego is, how come theirs is made of like granite, How come theirs is not fragile? Why doesn't it break easy? And it's because the egoic structure of men and women is different also. It's what Freud called the superego, is that thing about what should be. It's that thing about, this is right and wrong, and this should be this and it should be that and all of that. And that's what Freud called superego. And they're two structures. He called them separate structures, but they're both structures of the ego. And the man's ego is made of the past. I am this, I am that. And I project it and I say, you are this and you are that. And that's based in the past, and it's about the individual. But the superego says, we should be this way, we should be that way, this is how it should be. And this is something out of the collective. It comes from the collective, and the collective is feminine. And so a woman's ego is mainly more of the superego, which is what should be. Mm-hmm. And they're both egoic, and both of these things must come to an end. And what I would like to see is for the woman to develop that consciousness of the superego as well. And a lot of women do it, and they often get stuck. They get stuck at this place where they go, I shouldn't judge myself.
I shouldn't judge myself.
I went through that too, but I'm a man, I can get over that a bit easier. It's much more difficult for women to get over this thing, which is like this
yeah.
We can help with that stuff. But that's what I would like from women as well, rather than try to change me into an ideal that she thinks I should be. I would like her to see me. I would like her to open to where I am in the moment. I would like her to resist the impulse to change me into what she thinks I should be. And generally to grow up with me. That's what I would prefer. If we don't get it, that's okay too. Like, I like women just as they are. I like you just as you are, I don't care. I don't care. But I want this for our people,
I think that's what women probably do not understand and don't hear, that men actually like or love us the way we are, because we are constantly working on self-improvement and what's wrong with us and how we need to fix ourselves and do something.
Because you're constantly in this thing of what you should be.
Should be, what it should be. It's like this right now, but it should be like that.
And, we as men are really good at seeing people as they are rather than as they should be. We're better at that than women in general, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time when a woman can step back from the should be, she'll notice that a man is actually looking at who she is. I'm not saying it's always the case, it's not by any means. But it's a lot more the case than women think that is, because she's so in this constant self-judgment, and this super ego thing.
Yeah.
But it's just young, it's just young. It's just a young thing.
Sometimes, it's sometimes it doesn't leave a woman until a very older age. I worked with women after 50s, like older or 55, and that continuous self-criticism, self-judgment, it carries on. It's just if anything, it becomes even more habitual and so stuck that it's so hard to unstuck it from your being. And that part of you that masks it just kind of just sticks like a, oh my goodness, like a super glue. So
like super glue it is. And it's young, like that. Our culture has no room in there for us to grow up beyond these adolescent ways. Our culture, our whole culture is juvenile. And people like you and me do a whole lot of work. And so we drag ourselves out of there against the desires of the culture. No, we drag ourselves with hard work, because the culture is actively trying to drag us down into this way of being adolescent consumers. No?
Yes, absolutely. But I have to say that I see so many beautiful young men and women. I just spent 3 days in retreat with ladies as young as 22, 25, and as well as like 50, and the some beauty and some maturity and some awareness happens there. It's so incredible to see. And sometimes I even comment as like, oh my God, I wish I was that aware and that open and that in tune with myself when I was 22 or 25.
Yes.
Whoa. Yeah. So
there are amazing young people coming, for sure.
yes, so beautiful to see. So beautiful to see. So thank you so much for this incredible conversation. That last bit about see me as I am just gave me goosebumps. It's incredible. And it's so good to hear from men as well that we women are seen. And now it's our turn actually to see men and to see the beauty there and to see what is actually there, rather than project and or should want or try to raise you, which we are guilty of.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Anastasia. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always.
Thank you so much. Bye.